Looking back on the week that was and forward to the week ahead. It's the Fantasy Football Hustle. Here are your hosts, Brian Drake and Dwayne McFarland.
Get excited out there in fantasy land. What's going on? It's another week of the Fantasy Football Hustle. I'm your host, Brian Drake from FightingChanceFantasy.com, and I'm joined, as always, by the now glassesless. Is that a word? Glassesless? We'll go with it for right now. Writer from Pro Football Focus, EstablishTheRun.com. It is the great Dwayne McFarland. How are you, my friend?
Good, man. I just have my screen blown up super large. So
look at you.
Negating the glasses for now. We'll see. I got them here just in case I need them, Drake, just in case. So I figured I'd shave for you guys, wear no glasses, just totally like trip out the look this week.
If you're watching on YouTube or Facebook or wherever else you find us, you will see that we have some ADP data brought to you by our great friend Fantasy Mojo at fantasymojo.com, the best in FFPC ADP. So we thank him for letting us use this ADP draft board so you can follow along at home. And of course, the Fantasy Football Hustle is powered by PFF, folks. That is right. If you didn't know, last week, we have kind of joined forces here with our pals from PFF to bring you the latest and greatest in fantasy football content. And now you can use promo code HUSTLE. That's right, HUSTLE, for 25% off any PFF subscription and access to all of PFF's fantasy football rankings, their locked articles, and data you can't get anywhere else. I've been trolling around that site, Dwayne. Pretty soon, I think I'm going to become the analytical assassin with all the data I'm getting my hands on.
Dude, you totally could. There's like so much there that like it's honestly, it's like tough to like even get your mind around all of it. Like I have to just kind of section it down and like work on it piece by piece to try to figure out like what's the most valuable, because there's so much good stuff, but like what really translates over to fantasy. So I know we'll have some episodes later this summer where it's really just a deeper dive into some of the stuff that I've been working on and starting to work on now. I'm really just honestly starting to get going full blown, like in my research. Mm-hmm. The draft will obviously like kick it off to like another level with projections and all those sort of things. I've been kind of giving my mind a rest. That's what's so cool about tonight, why I'm so excited about the show. This is just kind of it's like a first take, right? It's looking at ADP. It's looking at where things are. It's almost like a what's your gut say, on this, which is really cool because sometimes you get some good stuff from that because, after years and years and years of doing this, I always typically, when I first sit down to start my projections for the season, I'll do like a gut ranking. And then it's interesting just to kind of see how does that stack up, like once you've gone in and done all the research. And there's definitely changes, but some stuff, it's funny, it doesn't really change that much. And it's just because of, like I said, for doing it for so long and, you've got this process you go through, it's like you kind of already start to see where you think, things are going to fall out.
Mm-hmm. And as we're getting geared up, folks, you don't have to be just a fan out there. I know there's a lot of content creators that listen to the show. Use the promo code HUSTLE. Get access to that data. It's only going to make you a better player, a better writer, a better fantasy analyst. Don't think twice. And folks, if you're into the NFL draft, and who isn't, PFF's going to be hosting some live draft shows on PFF.com April 29th through May 1st. They're going to be covering every single round with analysis and reaction from Chris Collinsworth and PFF's team of draft analysts. So tune in to PFF.com April 29th, 7 p.m. for the first round. And also that weekend, folks, you're going to hear the Hustle doing a few draft shows for them. It's going to be super exciting. We're so glad to be on board. And we're so glad to be here with you guys tonight. We got our usual cast of characters here in our live chat. So if you're rocking and rolling with us, we've got access to that. If I can only pull up the right screen so I can actually see what I'm trying to do, But, we're ready to go here. Like Dwayne said, it's a snapshot of fantasy football. Where are we right now in the middle of April? What does best ball look like? And there's a lot of smart guys over there at the FFPC. So we're going to kind of go through, pick out a few things that have stuck out to Dwayne and I, and see maybe where we can exploit this ADP for our own best ball purposes. So we're going to start.
One thing I'll say real quick, Drake, we've talked about this in the past, is at different times, right, in the offseason, and a lot of people won't be drafting right now, but if you're really into it and you want to be drafting now, the thing you got to be thinking about are who are the guys that you can continue to get now at a price that will probably be much higher later, right? But then what will happen when certain guys' prices go up, other guys' prices get, pushed down. So there's literally at different snapshots, like in draft season, as it really gets going. When I say draft season, fantasy football draft season, like there's really different ways you can approach the drafts, like as the summer unfolds, right? The way you may be approaching it in the early summer, based on the way ADP is playing out and the information we have may be very different than by midsummer and then again by late summer. So one of the things to try to think about now is if you are going to do some early drafts, like kind of who are the absolute must drafts that you're pretty sure they're going to move up, right, by the time that the drafts get here. And then again, on the other side of that, who are the guys that you think, they might just be a little bit overrated, worst case, they're probably already graded at their ceiling, and so they're not going to move down. You could still get some exposure to them if you want to, if you're building multiple teams. But there's also a better than zero chance, right, that their price could actually fall as people start to think through the situation, more and more and think about all the factors.
Fantasy football, if you've ever played this game, it starts and ends with the running back position. That's where we're going to start tonight. And Dwayne, one thing you noticed was that Jonathan Taylor, in your mind, is way too high with an ADP of 8, and Aaron Jones with an ADP of 112 is too low. Now, Taylor finished one spot behind Jones in PPR last year as RB6. Jones only played in 14 games, yet still saw 1,000 yards rushing and caught 47 of his 63 targets while scoring 11 touchdowns. Taylor, on the other hand, scored 12 total touchdowns to go along with nearly 1,200 yards rushing and caught 36 balls. Now, Dwayne, Jones lost competition for passing down work, while it looks like JT gained more in the form of Marlon Mack returning. So what are your thoughts on these two?
Yeah, and that's the main thing, right? It's just the overall picture. I love both players, but if I had to draft today and you told me I got to pick between Jonathan Taylor and Aaron Jones, I'm going to take, Aaron Jones. And here's why. I think Nyheim Hines has a very specialized role, and it's not going to go away, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because he's really good as a mismatch kind of chess piece out of the backfield, on hurry-up situations, passing downs. And Jonathan Taylor did get involved even early on in the season, actually, in some passing opportunities with the Colts last year. He actually did really good with those. He took one of those for a long touchdown. So he showed some skill there. But then the re-signing of Marlon Mack. And we know that Frank Reich has had a tendency to use 3 backs. I think Jonathan Taylor will obviously be clearly the lead back. But anytime you got to split with 3 guys, that's kind of worrisome. And so when I look at A.J. Dillon, he's not a threat for the passing down work that Jamal Williams used to take, right? Because he's not the guy they're going to trust in pass protection. And he could improve. Maybe he could take over more of that role. Where I really see him being a problem for Aaron Jones, this was really probably more down around the 5-yard line. But Aaron Jones has been so good at scoring touchdowns. It's not a cinch, right, that A.J. Dillon is just going to take over that work. Where I could see A.J. Dillon really starting to take on more of a role is maybe he takes like every third series, and he could be the guy that comes in, Drake, if they're ahead by 14 and it's the fourth quarter, got half, they got like 2 drives left and they need to salt away the game. They'll use Dillon, right, just to keep Jones fresh. And, that could be a good role for Dillon. But I think overall, you've got a 2-back situation there versus a 3-back. I like the offense a little bit better as well for the Packers, mainly because of the quarterback. You've got Aaron Rodgers versus Carson Wentz. So I mean, it's still close. Jonathan Taylor did some really good things down the stretch last year. I just think there's going to be games. I think people forget really quickly, right? Like what that looked early on and what those splits looked like. There were games where you literally couldn't use Jonathan Taylor. And not to say that we're going to go back to that level, because I think he did flash enough talent. They're going to be excited about getting him on the field. I just feel a little better about Aaron Jones's role overall. And again, that's not a bash on Taylor. I just think that if you're pricing him, pick 4, 5, 6, 7, like you're starting to price him up there, I think pretty much at his ceiling. Whereas Aaron Jones, with an increased pass roll, getting him at the end of the first round, I wouldn't be surprised if he finishes, the RB1. So that's why I throw that out there. I mean, the other close call is probably Zeke. I think I'm probably still going to take Zeke, over Jonathan Taylor. I think it's just mostly buzz, right, around Jonathan Taylor. Oh, it's the younger guy. It's the more exciting thing. But, even though Zeke gave up, a little bit of work to Pollard, and I think Pollard will get some of that work in passing downs. Again, it's a 2-person backfield versus a potential 3-way backfield. And you're kind of splitting hairs, but the main thing in my mind in the first round, Drake, I don't want to, just miss on a pick, right? I don't have to hit the biggest home run. I just want my first round pick to be worth a first round pick. Now, injuries could always happen. Those sort of things come into play. But right now, I just feel a little bit safer about Zeke. I feel a little safer about Aaron Jones. Really, if you think about it, I think Jonathan Taylor is very similar to like Nick Chubb. They're both in similar kind of roles. They're going to be sharing a backfield. They both carry the first, second down, kind of work. And 2 offenses that should be pretty good. But Nick Chubb, is going in the second round, whereas Jonathan Taylor, you've got to take him at the middle of the first. And that's not saying Jonathan Taylor couldn't pay off right at that pick. But again, I think your pricing is sealing in pretty much, whenever you're taking Jonathan Taylor at that pick. I think the best hope for Jonathan Taylor is that he's basically this year's Derrick Henry, right? Not, we know Nyheim Hines is going to have a role in the passing game. We know he's going to get spelled a little bit by Marlon Mack, but he's so good on the touches that he does get, right, that he has a chance to score, 14, 15 touchdowns, that kind of thing. The difference is, right, Derrick Henry really literally is the only game in town. Like, he's going to be on the field a ton. And so I just have some questions with Jonathan Taylor, not about him as a player, not about the offensive line he plays behind, none of that. Just really, how much is the workload going to get divvied up? And even if it's just a little bit more than the other guys, you got to go with the opportunity.
I get such a Joe Mixon vibe from Jonathan Taylor, just in terms of situational, where you look at like, oh man, we had Gio Bernard there forever, and now we've got Hines, and now Mack's there, and it's just, I don't know. It's like, when can we get this guy at his full potential? So we'll see what happens here in 2021. Just a heads up, if you're looking at the draft board here and following along at our Fantasy Football Hustle YouTube page, if you guys are new to the show, you're just finding us through PFF. Yes, we have a YouTube channel. All the shows are there, and we put up all kinds of fun content throughout the week. And we had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 of the top 12 picks, according to this ADP data, were running backs. Now it skews a little bit because we had 2 tight ends go here, but we understand that.
Yeah, it is a tight end premium format,
right? Yeah, so take that into consideration.
Yeah.
So how about Antonio Gibson? He's a guy that you felt was kind of risky. Now he finished as running back 13 last year on the second fewest attempts of any running back who finished in the top 13. He was boosted mainly by his 11 rushing touchdowns. So going off the board, and kind of the end round 2 here, what is so risky about him, and what would you rather be doing in that spot?
Yeah, it's all about opportunity cost for me, really, right? Because I could take Stephon Diggs, I could take DeAndre Hopkins, I could take A.J. Brown. I feel better about all 3 of those players as far as, again, now second round, I'm not trying to hit this huge home run. I just want a really good player. Right. Antonio Gibson, to me, has enough risk that I like him better as a guy that, and I'll draft several teams. So in the drafts where Gibson slides around, comes into the 3rd round, invariably there will be some point probably this offseason where Antonio Gibson will be priced in the 3rd round, right, in a draft that I do. And that's when I'll take him. I just don't want to pay for him in the 2nd round when I can have, guys that are going to get 150 targets, which all 3 of the guys I just named, I think are going to be in that range, and they have upside to have more. They're all still young and in the primes of their career. They play, in good offenses. A.J. Brown's literally going to get every single target known to man in Tennessee. So even if they play conservative like they have and they run the ball a lot, I mean, he's going to see 35% of the targets most likely. Just look at the roster. Who else is it really going to go to? Mm-hmm. And he's a guy that's shown that he can attack every area of the field. He's applicable in an offense any kind of way you want to use him, close to the line of scrimmage, intermediate, off play action, run after the catch. He can also beat you deep. So, I mean, he's just a guy that has so much in his bag. It's like, man, and now his opportunity is going up. It's like, I don't want to take Antonio Gibson over A.J. Brown. I just don't want to, because I've seen A.J. Brown's an elite talent. Antonio Gibson flashed some really interesting things for us last year, but he still has to take a developmental step this year, right? He's got to take a step of eliminating J.D. McKissic, right, from his role. He's got to take another step of keeping Peyton Barber. I know Peyton Barber's not a big deal, but he's still got to keep him off the field. And let's remember, this is a guy that was still really more of a receiver that's converting to being a running back, which is why people are so excited, right? The guy did what he did in his first really true full year as a running back, and he's playing in a scheme that utilized Christian McCaffrey 2 years ago to be the RB1 in all of fantasy football. And he could be a PPR nightmare. If for some reason Antonio Gibson can keep J.D. McKissic off the field and he becomes the true every down back like what Christian McCaffrey was, even if he doesn't take a huge step forward, right, in his skill set, which he'll likely have to do to be able to earn that role. But even if he doesn't and they just kind of force him onto the field and let him stay out there all the time, he's going to end up being worth a first-round pick. So there's definitely a range of outcomes where Antonio Gibson ends up being worth it. But here's what my thought process is. A.J. Brown I would almost guarantee that by the time we draft again, right, in 2022, my guess is A.J. Brown will be a first-round pick, period, right?
Wow.
And so when I look at him, I look at DeAndre Hopkins, I look at Stephon Diggs, I just feel a little bit better about him, Drake. And it's not that I don't like Antonio Gibson. I mean, I'll be honest, I'm going to draft Joe Mixon ahead of Antonio Gibson. You finally got Gio Bernard out of the way. Mixon, the talent's not really been the issue, right? I know a lot of people will bag on him, but he's a good running back. And if he gets all the volume, especially if they make an upgrade to their offensive line, last year they lost their first round pick in training camp, Jonah Williams. If they take another tackle this year in the first round, right, to help out Joe Burrow and the rest of the weapons, and it's going to help the running game, I mean, I'll be even more excited about Mixon. But I think, think about it. This time last year, Mixon was a late first, early second round pick. Now you're telling me he's a mid to late second round pick, and the thorn that's been in his side of Gio Bernard is gone. And like you could make an argument Mixon should be going at the end of this first round, early second round.
Plus, we don't know what Burrow's condition is going to be. He's still coming off that injury. He could play 0 preseason games. I mean, they're probably only going to be 2 anyways, but we could actually see the first few games of the season where he doesn't even play. So they could lean on him a ton in September.
Yeah, and I would argue we really don't want that. We probably really want Burrow in there because I think overall, right, just being in a better offense would be the better option for Mixon, because the thing that I'm most excited about is Mixon can be a fine pass catcher, right? And that's what you need in these PPR leagues. You want guys who can be out there all the time and they can catch the ball. They're going to, if you look at potentially, right, on paper right now, if you look at the Bengals, I mean, I would argue that Mixon's going to get the 3-down role. They did pay him, so he's going to get the inside the 5 work. He's going to get the short down and distance work. He's going to get the long down and distance work. He's going to get the 2-minute offense. He's literally going to get everything. And so it's going to be, if Mixon gets all that, it's going to be really hard for him to not finish, right, as a top 7, 8, 9 back. Right. It's going to, and he has an upside to finish in the top 4 or 5, depending on how injuries work. Right. And who gets hurt, who doesn't get hurt, that kind of thing. Joe Mixon is a guy that I think people have got recency bias on, and I get it because he burned them. Last year we told people to steer away from him at his ADP because we knew that this coaching staff had a history of continuing to put Gio on the field, just like we told folks around Josh Jacobs. Whenever they kept putting a passing down back out there for Josh Jacobs. So Josh Jacobs this year, right, he's going in the 3rd round, but rightfully so. That's probably where he should go with them adding Kenyon Drake and then having the guys they already have on their roster. Whereas with Joe Mixon, he's really got a path to be the every down guy. And we could be in an offense that could continue to improve.
Now, if you folks are wondering like, wow, this show, they talk a lot of FFPC. They talk a lot of high stakes. There's a reason for that. You get a lot of fantasy analysts out here who, they just kind of came up. They play a lot of random leagues that nobody ever pays attention to, and they do all these drafts that you never follow up on. Well, not here. Dwayne has actually put his money where his mouth is. He puts in a lot, folks, a lot into FFPC contests, and he's a 3-time top 5 finisher in FFPC contests, including the Football Guys Players Championship, most notably. That's why we value his opinion. That's why PFF, ETR, all these sites bring him on to share his smarts with you. So when you say like, hey, why should we listen to these guys on The Hustle? That's why, because we've got guys here giving you information that actually win money. So let's keep it rolling here. And if you follow this show closely, I'm a big Eagles fan. We're about to talk some Eagles football. So crack one open, actually maybe pour one out for Miles Sanders. And you don't think Miles Sanders and James Robinson are getting enough love. Mind you, Robinson finished last year as RB7 and at the moment only has to fight off Carlos Hyde. He's coming off the board at running back 18. That's in the middle of round 3, while Miles Sanders welcomes in a new coaching staff and quarterback to hopefully improve on his running back 23 finish. His ADP is actually above James Robinson as RB16 in the middle of the 3rd round. So what are your thoughts on these two fellas?
Yeah, I think these are two guys that they're a great value at where you're getting them. Now the draft has to play out, right? This is before the draft.
That's the key here with Robinson.
There's a lot of picks, available, for Jacksonville. We won't be surprised, right, if they take, somebody in the 3rd round, right, 2nd round, and they spend a pick there, and that will change things for James Robinson. I'm not that worried about Carlos Hyde, even though he has those ties to Urban Meyer. We've, kind of thought Carlos Hyde could be a hindrance to a couple of backs now over the last couple of seasons, and it just, and he's a good player, right? Don't get me wrong, but it's just at the point where, I don't see him being a big roadblock, right, to James Robinson. So to me right now, James Robinson's a big winner in the offseason just because they haven't signed anybody other than Hyde. So we'll just have to see how it plays out in the draft. But Miles Sanders is a guy that at this time last year, Drake, people were ecstatic for. What happened to Miles Sanders? He had a lower leg injury early in the preseason, never looked the same. Basically, the entire Eagles offensive line was completely decimated, right? So they're getting most of those players back, right? We should get Andre Dillard. You're going to have Jason Kelsey. Brandon Brooks, like one of the best guards in the league, was hurt. They run a lot of inside zone. So he and Kelsey are a huge part of what Miles Sanders does. So Sanders is a guy that while, he's not always the best processor of information on the field, finding the right holes. He makes too many jump cuts and things like that. At the end of the day, he's still an electric player. And I haven't gone back to look it up, but there were several weeks there in a row, Drake, when he kind of got healthy for a period that it seemed like every week he was busting off a 40, 50-yard touchdown.
That's right? What made it. He had 4 super long runs of, 50 plus yards, and that's what just ballooned his numbers. But he would have, it was very Saquon Barkley really, where you're like, wow, my God, this guy just keeps trying to bounce everything, and he's running for 0.2 yards, and then, oh my God, there's an 80-yard touchdown, and it saves your fantasy day. But maybe that's what you want. You want a guy that's got that home run ability, and he's got it.
So I like the idea, just kind of starting to put a draft strategy together, right? Is if you can come away with, say, a Kamara, or say you're picking in the first 4 or 5 picks, you come away with a Barkley, a Kamara, a Dalvin Cook, you make your choice. You come back, man, and you manage to land A.J. Brown. I'm taking A.J. Brown over J.K. Dobbins, Antonio Gibson, probably even DeAndre Swift, probably all day, right? We'd have to talk a little bit more about Eckler, to talk about, because they've got a new offensive coordinator. We can maybe come back to him later. But I'm taking, A.J. Brown over all those guys, and then turn around and get to grab Miles Sanders. I really like that. I like the start of a Dalvin Cook, A.J. Brown, Miles Sanders. I think that's a really good start, to a draft. I mean, another approach you could take, because there will be some more receivers we'll talk about, in the later rounds as well. You could come away with a Dalvin Cook / Joe Mixon / Miles Sanders. I like that start, as well. We'll see how things continue to change, as we move forward. But I think what you're running into right there is potentially 3 backs, right, that are going to get the majority of the work on their teams. So Sanders, I don't think we're at a point yet where we can just say, oh, he's injury prone, he's not going to get all the work. I mean, I look at the roster and I look behind Miles Sanders. Boston Scott's nice, but he doesn't scare me, Drake. Jason Huntley doesn't scare me. Now, again, they could draft someone. But what I love about this, right, is if Jalen Hurts, if this thing works out with Hurts, what we've seen these quarterbacks that can really, serve as a dual option, what they do for these guys in the running game, by creating, the extra person that the defense has to account for, right? And you can scheme this stuff up every week. I think that can really open up some huge things for Miles Sanders to do the thing he does really well, which is hit these big explosive home run plays. Mm-hmm. And I think he could easily be more involved in the passing game. I know you and I last year, I remember we were texting during the game, and we're like, why can Carson Wentz not hit like Miles Sanders in the flat? He couldn't get it to him. So I think there's a lot of upside with Sanders. So I always try to look at these guys, Drake, that last year Miles Sanders, before his injury, was a first-round pick. really what all's changed other than the fact that he got hurt and their whole offensive line got hurt. He's still the same player, right? So if you liked him last year at this time, and it's not like he's old, this is his third season. The Miles Sanders is the kind of guy that I like. I love him as a third-round pick because I think he could still easily end up in the top 12 running backs. If things worked out really great for Philly, he could end up in the top 6. I think he's got that kind of range of outcomes. So Miles Sanders is a guy that I'm happy to be taking.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at Sanders, what the key to his season is, can he catch passes from Jalen Hurts? Because this Eagles defense is going to be bad. I think they're going to take a corner in the first round. They have one legit corner, and he's 30 years old on the team. Their linebackers are shaky at best. The back end of the safeties, forget about it. They have no depth on the defensive line. So they're in a division of the NFC East, Dwayne, that is pretty loaded when you look at the offenses. So the Eagles are going to have to play in a lot of high-scoring affairs, and they're going to be in comeback mode a lot. So, man, you could realistically see a scenario where Miles Sanders is, tasked with catching 6 balls in the second half of games to try to come back. And I just want to throw this out there for us, the guys holding on, James Robinson. Now, we know that the Jags have the number 1 overall pick. They also have pick number 25 in round 1. They have pick number 33 in round 2, which is the first pick of round 2. And they have the 45th overall pick. And then they have a third rounder. So there's a lot of
landmines there.
A lot of opportunity for Travis Etienne to end up on this team.
But here's my thought on that, Drake. Knowing what we know, right, about analytics and running backs, if James Robinson did what he did last year and you could spend all those picks elsewhere, why not? Just let the guy be the dude and then add another back later in the draft, right? Like round 4, round 5. That's what you're hoping for. If you're a James Robinson owner, that's what you're hoping for. You don't want to see that popular early second-round pick that we've seen over the last few years because running backs have been pushed down boards, but then teams all of a sudden are like, well, we've ignored them this long, but there's some really good backs. I mean, that's what happened with Nick Chubb, right, to the Browns. He was an early second-round pick. So that's going to be a definite temptation, right? Mm-hmm. So we'll see what Urban Meyer, and the team decides to do with that pick. But you're hitting it, Drake. Like, he's got to avoid several landmines. And James Robinson will either
multiple fifths. There's a lot of picks.
Yeah, there's a lot. And 4th and 5th, it starts to be okay, right? Then it's like, okay, great, some competition, but this guy has proven, enough that he's probably going to get the first shot to be the starter, right? But if they invest an early 2, right, that, or even a 3, that's more scary, for me personally. There is a question in the chat room, Steven Dominguez, Steven, we love you, man. You know that. Steven's been with us for like 3 years now, Drake. But he's asking us to hit on Jacobs and Drake. So Josh Jacobs and Kenyon Drake, right? And Las Vegas. So, man, I think we hit on this a little bit with Matt, or maybe it was the week before in free agency show. But yeah, this is bad. This is bad for Josh Jacobs, Drake. But here's the deal with Jacobs. What could happen, it was already bad for Jacobs, right? Because we know they don't put him on the field in the passing downs, and there was always the hope maybe they would. He's totally capable of it. But I think now what you're going to have is for sure he's going to be getting spelled, and you're going to have Drake taking some of the passing down work. But what that could do is push Josh Jacobs' ADP down enough that you could just draft him to be the player that he is, right? Which is a guy that they want to use on first and second downs. He can still be a dynamic playmaker. He's going to still score the majority of the touchdowns. You need Vegas's offense, to be better. They didn't really do a lot this offseason, in free agency. So it's not really an offense that I'm looking at going, wow, they really took this big step forward. They seem to be kind of stuck in neutral. But having said all that, Josh Jacobs, you can bet on his talent. Like, if he starts falling into that 4th round range, it'll get harder for me to want to pass on Josh Jacobs, because at that point, like, even knowing the limitations on his role, I like the player. I think he's still a really good player. And so then weird things happen, right, Drake? So you get him in the 4th round, and let's say all the other backs on the team stay healthy, you probably still get value out of him, right? He can still be a top 24 back. But if for some reason Kenyon Drake gets hurt and he manages to keep his shoulders healthy and he doesn't get injured, and all of a sudden you get a run of – and it's funny how these things play out, right? We think of everything in terms of a whole season. But think, Drake, every year down the stretch, it could just be a stretch of 4 or 5 games, like last year for Jonathan Taylor when everything finally clicked. If you looked at the season before that first 4 or 5 games, like he wasn't ranked in the top 12 backs of fantasy at all. And all of a sudden, boom, he took off for that playoff stretch. He won people a lot of money. Like Josh Jacobs could still do that for you, right? Because he's a very talented player. Worst case, you're drafting him at the right price. You can stick him in your lineup as your RB2. Best case, something weird happens, right? And all of a sudden he does get the role, but you're not overpaying. And now you got a super talented player that could, again, be a top 12 back or even higher, depending on how the Raiders offense plays. So at that point, I start to like Jacobs. So I think the Kenyon Drake signing honestly could work to Jacobs's favor, right? Because he was probably already being overdrafted a little bit. And now just the name Kenyon Drake will probably push Josh Jacobs maybe down into the 4th round. And if you draft several teams, you might get him, in the later 4th round. There could be some, just we'll have to see, right? I can't predict how this will all play out, but those are the kind of scenarios, that I'm looking for. Whereas Josh Jacobs was an avoid for me last year. All of draft season, I drafted him on one team just to have one share of exposure, right, of like the 20-something teams I drafted, just because I didn't want to deal with, him not, having the every down role. Well, now if I can get a really good player at the appropriate price, I don't mind doing that.
Josh Jacobs last year finished ahead of, in PPR, Zeke Elliott, Kareem Hunt, Nick Chubb, Antonio Gibson, Melvin Gordon, just to name a few. I'm out on Josh Jacobs. He was propped up with 12 rushing touchdowns. That helped a lot. But
that's also what he does, and he's very good at. So it's not like those were all like 50 and 60-yard runs, right? He gets that work down. That's a typical Gruden kind of thing. He gets the work down inside the 5. You just need the Raiders' offense to be decent.
Yeah, I'm a bad shoulder, bad line. For me, what's Randy Jackson on American Idol say? It's a no for me, dog. He also asked about James Conner and Chase Edmonds. If you guys didn't see the news today, James Conner, formerly of the Pittsburgh Steelers, is signed with the Arizona Cardinals. 1-year deal, pretty much guaranteed money. He's going to make like $1.5 million. Not that that's great money or anything, but if you don't think James Conner is going to impact Chase Edmonds' value, I don't know what to tell you. How many rushing touchdowns, goal line carries is Chase Edmonds going to have with Kyler Murray as a quarterback and James Conner on this team? I can't see it.
Right. And I think that's the problem. I think what you could very likely see is James Conner really play more the Kenyon Drake role, right? Which last year was really not much work on the passing downs. That was all going to Chase Edmonds, who they like to move around. They like him at what he does. Not saying Edmonds may not be the guy to get more of the role, right? He's definitely flashed. But I think this is just a situation where, honestly, I'm going to take the one I can draft later. Whichever one starts sliding in draft Drake, that'll be the guy I take a shot on. Because what we do know is it is a good enough offense. And schematically, they do some things that are problematic, in the run game, because Kyler Murray is such a threat that there is the opportunity for, if somebody gets this backfield all to themselves, even if it's just for a stretch of 3 to 4 weeks, right? That could win you 3 or 4 games, right? We saw that the year before with Kenyon Drake, right? Remember when he basically had just came over and didn't even know the playbook and went off for 30 points in a PPR league against the 49ers in his first game, out of nowhere. And then we've seen Chase Edmonds come out there and have a 25, 30 touch game. So they could both have value in and out, right, throughout the season. It's going to be tough to say who's going to have the most value going into the season. That's one that we'll definitely have to pay more attention to as we move into camp to try to get a better beat on what are their roles going to be. What's Cliff Kingsbury thinking, and we'll just have to pay attention.
Last running back I want to ask you about, Dwayne, is coming off the board in the middle of round 4 at running back 22. And last year he finished in PPR as running back 4. That's David Montgomery, right? Mainly due to his career high 54 receptions. We don't think that continues this year because Tariq Cohen is healthy, right?
Yeah. I think Tariq Cohen is a big problem, kind of like what we talked about with, Naheem Hines earlier, right, for Jonathan Taylor. That's what you're going to deal with David Montgomery. So Montgomery's price isn't terrible, right? You're talking about a guy that's going in the early 4th round. Prefer him maybe a little later than that, but Cohen's definitely going to be a problem. A big part of Montgomery's, footprint, like in the fantasy community last year. It came at the end of the season whenever he didn't have to worry about Tariq Cohen, and he was literally getting all of the touches. So we haven't seen a change there as far as, Matt Nagy's still there. I think they'll be committed to using Cohen. I mean, who knows? They could surprise us, right? But it's just when you got a player like that, coaches, you know how they are, Drake. They're like, oh, man, I got to get him out there. He's this great mismatch. He's going to be do this and that against a linebacker. He's going to burn somebody on a wheel route for an 80-yard touchdown. It's like, okay, great. You got that one play out of him for the season, whereas, David Montgomery may give you a better all-round skill set, But Montgomery, I got to give him credit, right? Because we were pretty worried about the guy. Like, he did flash some things last year. Now, he had some pretty big holes to run through. Some things really broke his way. But, yeah, I'm with you. I'm a little bit leery of Dave Montgomery. At least his price is in the 4th round, right? It's not in the 3rd, 2nd round. Overall, I would say right now, man, ADP is pretty sharp. There's not a ton of huge holes that I'm seeing. Like, there's some different, there's areas where I differ in my opinion. But there's not a ton of just huge gaffing holes where you're just like, wow. If you think back 10, 15 years ago, David Montgomery would probably still be a 2nd round pick because nobody would be thinking about Cohen coming back.
Oh my God, he was a top 5 running back last year.
Exactly. That's exactly how it would work. People are so much smarter now, right? There's just so much more good information out there. People just analyze this stuff a lot differently. We've got a new breed of fantasy player, which is great, right, for the game. There's just so many smart, intelligent people thinking this stuff through all the time, and they never turn it off, right? They're always at it, always, passionately, taking their viewpoints on Twitter, and, it's like iron sharpens iron. So there's a lot of really good folks out there. So it's just tougher, right, to find an edge these days. And overall, I would say the ADP is pretty sharp. There's a few areas where I think there's some pretty big opportunities, which we'll get into here in a bit, but overall it's pretty sharp.
As our friend of the show, Bob Harris, always says, you're not trying to draft last year's best team. You're trying to draft this year's best fantasy football team. And if you're trying to look sharp for the fantasy season, go on Twitter, go over to @FFHustle. That's the show account. And the pinned tweet is our Viridian Global apparel store. See the little hoodie I'm wearing? It's Champion. All the kids are wearing that in the streets, right? You can get a sick hat like this. Look at this. You got a little trucker hat, Fantasy Football Hustle. We got gear for the kids. We got zip-up hoodies, winter hats. It's supposed to snow here in upstate New York, Dwayne, this weekend. It was 80 on Saturday. So, I'm not putting those away just yet. But, help us out. I'm at Drake Fantasy on Twitter. He's, of course, at Dwayne McFarland. The show is at FF Hustle. Try to look good out there. And I heard you.
Hey, Drake, let's switch seats real quick. I get to ask you about one back, right? And we'll leave the rookies out for now. But so what about a guy like Clyde Edwards-Helaire, right? You still have Le'Veon Bell there. You're still going to have Darrell Williams there. But, I mean, just when I look at that, like, how different is that than Jonathan Taylor? You get a guy in a great offense, and he's going in the 3rd round, right? Versus now Jonathan Taylor, to be fair, showed way more, right, than Clyde Edwards-Helaire. He showed he could be a dominant player down the stretch. We still haven't seen that from Clyde Edwards-Helaire. But there's a lot of people in the draft community that really did like Clyde Edwards-Helaire coming out of college. Jay Moyer, one of our friends of the show, he loves, Clyde Edwards-Helaire. He's a guy, and, Jay's a guy that we obviously listen to. Mm-hmm. Look at a guy like CEH. It's like, like, he's just kind of sitting there in the 3rd round. I'd like him better in the 4th round, but, like, what's the potential opportunity there? The reason I like a player like him, Drake, is I know he's going to play on on an elite offense, right? So even if you get half the work, right, hopefully you just get 50% of the work. Like, what's 50% of the work worth on a Patrick Mahomes, Andy Reid offense, right?
Yeah.
It's like, it's not equal to what, 50% of the Raiders offensive work is. Those two things they're not equal, right? So you have to take that into account. And so Edwards-Helaire, like, when we were kind of getting ready for the show tonight, he was definitely one that I was just kind of sitting there going like, like, I haven't really pinned down how I feel about him. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, remember, this guy came in as a rookie during a pandemic season. He had no offseason, no mini camp, no OTAs, none of that stuff. And Andy Reid spent a 1st-round pick on him. Now, was it a luxury pick? Of course. Do they have a couple of backs behind him? Absolutely. But we have now a full offseason. We're going to get some training camp. And you've got a guy who's going to be playing with Patrick Mahomes on an electric offense. He only caught 36 passes last year. Like, we were hoping that he was going to be, into the 40s, pushing 50. And maybe this year he does. I remember Brian Westbrook had a few years in Philadelphia before his knees went out where he caught 90 balls. Why can't Clyde Edwards-Helaire add another wrinkle to this offense
and Westbrook's actually a good example. Like Westbrook was a bit of a dud in his rookie season, but in the second season took a step forward, right? So again, I just challenge people to think about, if you loved Clyde Edwards-Helaire last year, why was it? Oh, he was in an Andy Reid's offense. Look at all these great Andy Reid backs. Look at the potential of, this overall Chiefs offense, all these things. Oh, Darrell Williams and Damian Williams is gone, but Darrell Williams is a journeyman. Now we do have Le'Veon Bell in the mix, but we showed Le'Veon Bell could hardly even get on the field. He's right down the stretch, So, and we say, who cares? As soon as we say something like that, like Le'Veon Bell will lead the league in rushing for 4 weeks, right? Oh, weird crap happens in fantasy. But the point being, kind of go back and think through that. And you have to either think, okay, was that flawed logic, right? Or was there a premise that was wrong somewhere in there based on all the research we did that made people think Clyde Edwards-Helaire should be a first-round pick? And I would argue that no, there was still a reason to consider Edwards-Helaire as a first-round pick. So how much has really changed this year, right, versus last year, versus just the fact that he didn't break out like we thought? Right. It's like, I think about this like stocks. You know me lately, Drake. I'm like studying the stock market all the time. And you're studying like certain patterns and you're waiting for these stocks to break out. And some of them they'll just break out and they'll just blow through the roof. Right. And they'll make you like 15, 20% in a day. And the technicals, everything lines up and you're like, wow, that was an awesome stock. And then there's others that will do that and they'll kind of like give you a head fake and then they'll just start to trail back down. But then guess what? Like a week later, man, they'll just pop and they'll go. And so we have these kind of setups in fantasy too, right? And so I'm just wondering, is Edwards-Helaire going to be, potentially that? I think the rub for me with Edwards-Helaire, Drake, are the receivers you have to start talking about that are going around him that you may feel pretty comfortable with, like Calvin Ridley, really took a huge step forward last year. DK Metcalf, right, is sitting there in that range. Keenan Allen with Justin Herbert's in that range. So, there are some other players that are going in that area more at receiver, right, that you could just really feel good about. But I think Edwards-Helaire is an interesting one, to me, just because of how far he's fallen, given where he was last year. And I don't think that much has really changed. He's also a player that got hurt. And you mentioned, coming in as a rookie, didn't get all the mini camp work, all the same things. Look, dude, none of the rookie running backs just blasted out of the gates. They all had to wait. DeAndre Swift, it was later in the season. Jonathan Taylor, it was later in the season. Edwards-Helaire kept getting dinged up. So, it could easily be Edwards-Helaire rotating in at the beginning of this next season and getting to just basically shoot out of the starting blocks like some of these guys got to finish last season. I'm just saying it's a possibility, and he's pretty, relatively speaking, compared to the other backs, like he's priced well.
Yeah, a lot of guys are going to have that recency bias. And like Mike Clay always talks about, the regression to the mean on touchdowns, and he didn't have very many last year. So
yeah,
it can only go up.
Exactly.
Question in the chat room.
Now that we spent like 50 minutes on backs, what else?
Yeah, we'll go real quick on this one. Last thing about Pittsburgh running backs. How do you guys value Anthony McFarland? Friend of the family, obviously, Dwayne. You see him at the reunions. And Benny Snell. Who do we target? This is 100% a team that's drafting a running back. So whoever they draft, target that guy.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think right now, though, like if I had to pick, I would still lean on the fact that we know Tomlin does like to go more with one back and then have a change of pace back. They like to basically, the way he looks at it is the offensive line, right, and the running back have to have like this perfect marriage of fit. Like it's all about timing and spacing and the feel for one another, which is why he's always leaned towards a bell cow back whenever he's been able to, whenever he's had health. I think that would be Snell as the guy that would be the every down. And then I think McFarland would be more change of pace. I don't say that with like some 90% certainty, like, oh my God, go get Benny Snell right now. I'm not going to like jump up on my desk and like start stomping on it for Benny Snell. My gut just says that would be the way they would lean. But what I will say is McFarland, I do feel like has more upside, Drake, right? He's got the big play, ability, and he's the guy that could bring a different element to their running game as far as speed goes. So I would say I would lean to Benny Snell, but McFarland, he definitely has, his own traits that would make him a guy that I would be especially if they don't draft another back, that would make him worth rostering, right? Depending on where he's going, which I don't even know, Drake, where is he going right now? Where's Anthony McFarland going?
I don't know if he's even on this. Let me see. Let me scroll.
Oh, he's got to be on your list here.
Let's see. And again, shout out to our boy Fantasy Mojo hooking us up with this great data. Let's see. I go down all the way to running back 76. He is running back 64, Anthony McFarland, going in the 16th round.
So he's a slam dunk, and that's going to move up, right? There was the assumption that maybe Connor gets re-signed, that kind of thing still. So, yeah, McFarland is going to shoot up in drafts up till draft weekend. I don't even see where Benny Snell is on here either, so he's probably pretty far down as well, Drake. But
he's watching the car in the parking lot.
He's actually running back 52, so it seems like the public kind of agrees already with kind of where my sentiment is, but notice they're pretty close together. So both guys will move up, on this news. If you're trying to hit the home run, I mean, it really might be McFarland.
All right, we said we were going to move at a brisk pace here on the show. We're 45 minutes in, and we're just getting to wide receivers, so we're gonna snap it along here. And you've got a screaming value here at the end of round 2, Dwayne, and it's AJ Brown.
Yeah, and we've already talked about it, so we don't hit on it time. Look. What are you looking for in fantasy football? The convergence of ultimate talent with ultimate opportunity. The problem for A.J. Brown has been you were in an offense that tended to be a little more conservative. They want to run the ball just as much as they want to pass the ball. Last year, at least, we saw them from a pace standpoint open things up under Arthur Smith. So you've got, a change in your offensive coordinator now in Tennessee, but I really don't think that we're going to see a lot change with offensive coordinator Todd Downing. He's the former tight ends coach, just like Arthur Smith was the tight end coach from before. So I think, Vrabel's still going to have his thumb on this thing. But at the end of the day, now, Drake, it's like I'm gonna read off, the receivers. Now, they could certainly draft someone. And we do like Josh Reynolds, right? They signed Josh Reynolds, who could be a guy that can help push the field vertically, right, and push safeties down the field. And then you've got Nick Westbrook Ikini. I'm not sure if I'm saying that right. I apologize if I'm not saying it correctly. And then you got Jonnu Smith also departing. Corey Davis and Jonnu Smith are both gone. And so Anthony Fercer, right, we'll talk about him a minute at tight end. But when I just look at this, I'm like, this is going to be an offense centered around A.J. Brown and Derrick Henry as much as possible. So now what happens is you get an offense that doesn't throw as much as like the Falcons, where even if you just had like a 22% target share, you could end up with 130, 150 targets. In this offense, right, last year, if you had a 22%, you would have had like 110 targets. Well, now, I mean, A.J. Brown's probably going to be in line for 30 to 35% of the targets. So I just don't see a way where A.J. Brown doesn't finish, in the top 4 to 5 receivers. He can do everything on the football field, like I mentioned earlier. So it's just one of those unique opportunities where you have an ascending talent that can do everything. Now getting even this bigger opportunity to take on more of the offense. And it's not just like, there's these empty targets, so we got to assign them somewhere. This is a guy that's been demanding looks anyway, right? He's a super talented player. So, yeah, I think A.J. Brown is like, man, end of the second round is like, it's going to be really hard for me to like ever pass that at the end of the second round. I'm going to have to force myself to like fade that a few times just so that I don't build like the same roster, over and over.
Maybe you start your draft running back. You're like throwing it old school that way. We found 3 value plays and they all pop off the board starting in the middle of round 3. And that's Keenan Allen, Terry McLaurin, and Allen Robinson.
Yeah, I mean, and Allen Robinson's even sliding into the 4th round at times. So Robinson, again, has a quarterback change. He'll probably have Andy Dalton under center, but we could argue that might be the best quarterback. It's funny, every year, right? We're like, Robinson gets a little less crappy quarterback. We're like, this is the best guy he's ever had. He went from Blake Bortles to, Nick Foles, and we thought that was this big upgrade.
Who was his high school quarterback? Where's that guy?
Yeah, they may want to sign that guy. But Yeah, I mean, these are just steady guys, right? Like, I feel really good about Keenan Allen. I feel good about Calvin Ridley, in the third round. I feel good about Terry McLaurin, especially with, Ryan Fitzpatrick, involved now in Washington. I think those are just all guys that, they're gonna be right there on the tip of wide receiver 1. If not, they'll be a high-end wide receiver 2 for you. Mm-hmm. And they could all easily be in the wide receiver 1 conversation. So Calvin Ridley's still definitely ascending. What we have to worry about with Ridley is if Arthur Smith implements more of, the kind of offense that he had in Tennessee. And we don't know that for sure because now he has freedom. He's not under a defensive coordinator, right, as a head coach like he was with Mike Vrabel. So we can't assume that he won't open things up more. He very well could. He's a very creative coach. I expect a lot of play action. I do expect to see them use, more wide zone concepts, different things like that. But I think the only risk to Calvin Ridley and Julio Jones is if all of a sudden they do try to play like Tennessee's offense from last year, and then the pie shrinks, right? And then all of a sudden Calvin Ridley and Julio Jones, if they're both splitting, one gets 22%, the other one gets 21%. Well, now you're basically looking at the Titans last year. So there is a little bit of risk, I think, baked in with Ridley, and Julio, but Julio's going a little bit later. He's going almost a full round later, but it's just tough. It's just tough, Drake, right, to not like it. I mean, Calvin Ridley's done everything you can ask, right? He was good as a rookie. He blew up last season. You're coming into the third year. You got to feel really good about him. And the other guy that's sitting right there is DK Metcalf, right, who just was like amazing for the first half of last year, and defenses just started trying to take all of that away, right? So basically Seattle just got to adapt their game plan to some extent. I do worry about them going back to more ground and pound as well, though, right? Or then there's only like 100 targets to him and 100 targets to Lockett. But very efficient player, dominant player. You could put him up there in that. He could end up being just the same conversation as AJ Brown.
Yeah, these are guys who finished in the top 7 at wide receiver last year. So some nice value there. Let's head on down to the heart of Texas and talk about your Cowboys for a second. And it starts and ends here with Mr. CeeDee Lamb because he's currently going off the board ahead of wide receivers like teammate Amari Cooper, Chris Godwin, Mike Evans, and Julio Jones. He's wide receiver 13 off the board. Now,
he's going ahead of Allen Robinson.
Mike Evans was top 12 last year. Guy had 13 touchdowns. We're putting CeeDee Lamb ahead of him already? Come on.
Yeah. Look, and I love CeeDee Lamb, but I think this is a bit overboard. I think, what we'll see with Dallas is a spread around offense between Amari Cooper, CeeDee Lamb, and then I think, Michael Gallup will be involved. You're going to get Blake Jarwin back. Who knows? They could draft another weepon as well. Oh, I just think, it's a very diverse offense, man. So it's his second year, right? Now, Lamb did some really good things last year. So, and I get it, but people, they're drafting upside, right? You want to be bullish on young, talented players. Mm-hmm. So I totally get the argument, right, of drafting CeeDee Lamb. But to me, like if you're drafting CeeDee Lamb ahead of Allen Robinson, aren't you just kind of hoping that CeeDee Lamb can put up Allen Robinson numbers, basically? Then you would be validated by your pick. Why not just take Allen Robinson, right? You've already seen him do that multiple years. It's not like Allen Robinson is too old or anything. So I just don't see the upside for Lamb, right, to be like a wide receiver 1 with the other weapons around him this year. And look, dude, we touted CeeDee Lamb. I bet we touted CeeDee Lamb as much or more than any other podcast for redraft last year. We told people to get off Michael Gallup. We told people to be all over CeeDee Lamb because of the way they were going to use him. We were keeping tabs on it in training camp. And we knew that Amari Cooper was going to be a key part. And we thought Gallup would really be the guy that would be left out. And he was. And so I still think Lamb and Cooper will be the top 2. But I'm not saying Gallup's a bad player, right? He's still a good enough player to demand targets, right? And it's just an offense where you've got 3 or 4 weapons and Dak's going to, send it to who's open. I don't see any one of these guys getting, 25, 30% target share. What you're going to be counting on for where all these guys are being drafted. Now Gallup's going a little later, but for Amari and for Lamb, I think you're really just going to be counting on a high octane, fast paced offense, which is what we saw early in the season before Dak went down.
Yeah. And you're going to see him coming out of the slot a ton. Remember last year when he was coming off the field and they were bringing in, some jabroni left and right off the bench?
Yeah.
Come on, let's get realistic. I think people saw what a young Calvin Ridley did, and they're like, "Oh, let's just get the next Calvin Ridley, and that'll be."
I think that's exactly what's going on. Look, and Lamb's a really good player. The situation is just playing out a little bit differently for Lamb, right? I think Lamb's gonna eventually be, a guy that we love to talk about every year in fantasy. And I would much rather have Drake. I don't know about you, but I look at CD Lamb and think, man, I would love to have CD Lamb as my wide receiver 3. CD Lamb as my wide receiver 2 even makes me just a little bit skittish. I'm not saying I wouldn't do it, but I'd rather construct my roster in a way where I'm getting to use my 4th round pick on something else and make Lamb my pick in the 5th round, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, last year we were telling people, hey, if CD gets to you in the 8th or 9th round, just do it, right? And I think we were in one draft where we actually took him in the 7th. So, but the 4th is just, it's a little bit high for me. And again, it's opportunity costs. I got to take him over Allen Robinson. Not doing that. I got to take him over Mike Evans. Not doing that. Because again, what's the reason that Mike Evans and Chris Godwin are going in the 4th round? Because they have a lot of mouths to feed in their offense. Well, it's the same thing Dallas has, but the Bucs have actually already proven that they could feed all those mouths, right, for a full season. We've seen them do that. So I think, I still prefer Chris Godwin and Mike Evans over CeeDee Lamb. I prefer Allen Robinson. Then after that, right, you probably start getting into that range where you could talk me into, well, do I want to take CeeDee Lamb and his upside versus a more steady guy like Robert Woods, right? Then you got this actual kind of argument that you're working your way through. But before that, some of these other guys, and I'm taking DJ Moore over CeeDee Lamb, right? So you could probably start the conversation at Julio Jones because there's some injury risk there. Maybe that's where that kind of conversation starts. But for me, it's just a little bit high right now, Drake. And I love the player.
Let me throw this one at you quick. At the end of round 4, you can take CeeDee Lamb or throw it down 12 picks later. T. Higgins is going off the board. Who would you rather have?
T. Higgins.
Okay.
I think T. Higgins has a chance to actually could be a true alpha, right? He's shown us he can stretch the field vertically. Not to say that CeeDee Lamb can't, but he's a bigger player than CeeDee Lamb. He's got chemistry with his young quarterback. Not to say CD and Dak don't, but I just see this with AJ Green out of the picture and T. Higgins already showing us last year that, look, he came out of the gates hot, man. He came out showing people that he could do things that we had questions about based on his film and based on his college production. He answered a lot of those questions, and now he's going to be in a situation where I think he could easily see 25, 28, 29%. The biggest difference, right, is I don't see a third player on the Bengals that's just always going to be in the mix, right? I think you got Tyler Boyd working the slot. You got Higgins working the vertical, the outside stuff. He'll get some run after the catch opportunities. But then and I like Auden Tate, right? But I think Gallup's better than Auden Tate, right? Drew Sample had his kind of chance, didn't do anything last year. We saw that Blake Jarwin actually did flash a little bit. Dalton Schultz even got involved in the Cowboys passing game whenever Blake Jarwin went down. So I just see there's a chance for the offense to be a little more consolidated, right, in Cincinnati, and I get it for a lot cheaper. I actually think T. Higgins right now is one of the more underpriced wide receivers.
I would agree there. So T. Higgins starts you off here, or actually he finishes.
He starts the 5th round.
Yeah, he starts the 5th round.
CeeDee Lamb, begins the 4th round.
Let's
so you get him around later.
How about a couple other guys here that are coming off the board near the end of round 5, and that's Robert Woods, Kenny Golladay, and a guy who was top 10 last year in Adam Thielen. Now, these guys might not be super sexy, Dwayne, but as I like to remind our audience, even ugly people need to get laid. So, 3 guys who put them in your lineup, they're probably going to give you wide receiver 1, wide receiver 2 numbers most weeks.
Yeah, I think they're going to typically give you wide receiver 2 numbers. And the reason they fall here, right, is because just what you said, they're not super sexy. I think Kenny Golladay still could be, right? Now, they're going to have a lot of weapons with the Giants. I know people have questions about Jason Garrett and his ability to execute an offense. There's questions about Daniel Jones. But I mean, the Giants are loaded up, right, on offense. I mean, they've got several good players now, and there is a chance for Golladay to potentially carve out a little bit more of a role than what he had, in Detroit, because I think there's just a chance that, he's a little bit better, right, than some of the players he's around, even though we like some of these other guys. Deontay Johnson's a very interesting one, Drake, because if you told me Deontay Johnson could be healthy for 16 games in a season, he should be getting drafted in the third round. Really, all you're wondering is, can Deontay Johnson stay healthy? He was very clearly, when on the field and able to be healthy, he was the lead guy. He was the guy playing more of the Antonio Brown role of old, and he was being successful at it. He was just getting hurt.
Yeah, and can Ben's arm stay attached to his body? How about this one, Dwayne? Odell Beckham was once the first wide receiver off the board in fantasy. Now you get him in round 7 as the 32nd receiver off the board. If he's finally healthy in this Kevin Stefanski offense, is there league-winning potential here with OBJ?
Yeah, man, I'm in. It'll be the second year in this offense. The price is so depressed at this point.
Look at the scrubs going around him. Mostert, Ronald Jones, Leonard Fournette, get out of here.
Yeah, exactly. Technically, Beckham still should be in the prime of his career. He has had some injuries. He does have a tendency towards drama that can cause some problems. So there's some risk, but it's all baked in the 7th round for a guy that could still put up a top 12 wide receiver season for you, right? Mm-hmm. It's not like the guy's 35, right? He's not ancient. He's still at a point where if he decides to get his head on straight and really commit himself, I think Beckham could be, he could be a steal this year. He's definitely going to be on several of my teams. The way I look at this is like, you can get Odell Beckham in the 7th round, this year, and last year around this time, I want to say T.Y. Hilton cost you a 4th or a 5th, and now you can get Beckham as a 7th. I really like it. Yeah, there are going to be games where they'll just totally lean on the running game, and that can make it a little bit scary. But I think Beckham, is a great pick for me, my mind, in the 7th round. Some people argue, well, that's what people thought about AJ Green last year at this time. Is upside in the 7th or 8th round. Beckham's younger, right? And while Beckham has battled some nagging injuries and things like that, I think he's still more of a dynamic player than what AJ Green was at this period last year. So I don't think that's really a good comparison to compare the two guys. Yes, they've both fallen because of injuries down draft board, but I think there's a little less to worry about with OBJ. And he brings a little bit more upside.
My God, if you're following along on our YouTube channel, again, just search Fantasy Football Hustle, and you'll see the ADP draft board. Wide receiver is so deep. In the 7th round, I mean, like I said, there's scrubs, Mostert, Jones, Fournette. In round 8, Damian Harris, Mike Davis. These guys aren't going to have – I don't care what Mike Davis is doing today. He's not going to be the lead guy. Meanwhile, Will Fuller, Deebo Samuel are coming off the board. Cortland Sutton's over there. My God, it's unbelievable. The value you can get a wide receiver. Woo.
Yeah.
Anyway.
I'm with you. I mean,
take a drink.
Again, it's early, but my goal would be to come away with 2 to 3 backs, right, in the first 4 to 5 rounds, and then pound some of these receivers, but also, grab one really good receiver up top, which namely, I like the guys in the 2nd round of A.J. Brown, DeAndre Hopkins, and Stephon Diggs, because I feel comfortable taking all of those guys over Antonio Gibson, DeAndre Swift, and J.K. Dobbins. And I love all 3 of those running backs, but I'm just not real sure about their situation right now, where I'm very sure about the receivers in their situation. And then, turning around, right, and you can come back in the 3rd round and you get a guy like Miles Sanders, right? Let's see what happens with James Robinson. And we haven't even mentioned the rookies yet, right? We're going to see where these rookie backs land. So, and they're going to get a full offseason to get integrated into offenses. So you're going to have Najee Harris, you're going to have Travis Etienne, hopefully Trey Sermon, who Matt Waldman talked about with us last week. If you guys haven't heard that, go back and check out that episode. Matt was awesome in that and did a great job breaking down Trey Sermon, a guy that a lot of people are not talking about in the draft. So yeah, Drake, I'm with you. I'm totally with you.
I love the subtle plug right there to go back and listen to the archives. Great. That's great work. That's Radio 101 right there, the callback. So how about Jalen Rhaegar, okay? At the moment, he's the Eagles wide receiver 1. I sincerely think that they're going to take a corner in the 1st round. But anyways, he's got a new strong arm quarterback. He is nearly free at the end of round 13 as wide receiver 52. Now, mind you, he was hurt most of all last year. His shoulder injury, mind you, came in practice in August when he hurt his shoulder making a tackle after a Jalen Hurts interception. I mean, it's so crazy here in Philadelphia. But again, free pick right there. A couple other shots in the dark I want to ask you about, Dwayne. How about at the end of round 12, Gabe Davis and Denzel Mims in the 15th?
I love all those. And you can throw Mecole Hardman in there. This is one that kind of surprised me. And you know me, I'm not the biggest Hardman fan. I think there's reasons they keep him off the field. But at the same time, he is a burner, and he plays in Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid's offense. And he was still learning how to play receiver when he was drafted. So there's still a lot of upside left on the bone with Hardman. We just need to get him on the field more. Now you have Sammy Watkins gone. I don't know that necessarily means he gets Sammy Watkins' role because he's not really a good blocker in the running game like what Watkins could do. That's probably more Byron Pringle, or if they draft another receiver this year.
And they were in on a
Marcus
lot
Robinson.
of guys in free agency at wide receiver. God knows why nobody went there, but I think they're going to draft a guy fairly early.
Yeah, I think they could too. But as of right now, I can get potentially the third option, right? And that's an explosive playmaker in the Chiefs offense. I mean, Mecole Hardman cost this much or more last year, depending on when you were drafting, right? With Sammy Watkins on the team. Again, it's another one of these things where you look at it and you're like, really? Like, it cost more than this last year, and now the situation's better, right? Is a receiver that was still learning how to play the position. He's now in his third season. He's got an opportunity to step up and earn a bigger role, right? If he can do that. So yeah, I think Hardman's a guy that I like taking a shot on. You named my favorite though. And that was Jalen Rhaegar. Like, that's just kind of silly. People totally asleep. Somebody's got to step up in Philly. Now Fulgham, am I saying his last name right, Drake? Is it Fulgham?
Yes.
Travis
Fulgham.
Okay.
Kid they got off the Lions practice squad.
Yeah, and he did great last year. So, he's a guy that you could get super late, in your draft as well. The other one's Jerry Jeudy, man. Jerry Jeudy had games last year where he had 10 targets and, he dropped like 5 of them. At the bottom line, the guy, he's getting open. He's a first-round pick last year. Jerry Jeudy you can get, in the 10th round right now. Like, I love all those picks, man. You give me Jerry Jeudy. Marquis Brown was a 5th, 6th round pick last year. Now he's a 10th round pick. That's an appropriate discount. I still like Marquis Brown. He's still a young player. Do I love the Ravens offense? No. But really, what's changed since last year that now he's worth, if you thought Marquis Brown was going to be a guy on an offense that was going to, just light things up in the air, well, you were just wrong last year. You had a bad assumption about, what was going to happen. But now he's priced as a 10th round pick, and he's still a young player. I mean, I love it. Marquis Brown, Jerry Jeudy, Jalen Rhaegar. We haven't even gotten to the rookies yet. Mecole Hardman. Heck, Drake, Antonio Brown in the 14th round. Like, in games Mike Evans or Chris Godwin are out, like Antonio Brown, you'll be fine starting him, right? He'll be an easy wide receiver 3 for you.
Yeah, we don't even know if he's going back to Tampa. So,
yeah, true. I mean, he's got to go. The last guy I'll give you is Christian Kirk. Yes, they signed AJ Green, but I think this could be a good thing for Kirk. I think he's going to get to play inside now, which really suits his game. He can stretch the field vertically out of the slot. You still got Andy Isabella still sitting around there, but I think Kirk's going to win over that role. And I think that could be a real win for Christian Kirk, and I could easily see him being, really being DeAndre Hopkins and then him with a sprinkling, right, of AJ Green. So Christian Kirk in the 15th round right now, absolutely. I love all those darts.
On to tight end, and Tyler Higbee is entirely too low at tight end 12 going in round 8. Every year you're going to hear the fantasy community, tight end is so deep this year. There's so many options. By week 4, there's 2 good tight ends and everyone's scrounging the waiver wire. So let's talk about tight end for a second. Tyler Higbee, the guy gains Matt Stafford, loses Gerald Everett. For that matter, he lost Josh Reynolds off his team on a squad that is built to win today. So what are your thoughts on Higbee and the Rams?
Yeah, Higbee's the one that just screams to me he's being undervalued right now. I mean, we saw what Higbee did, right, at the end of 2019 for like that 4 or 5 game stretch. He was putting up Travis Kelce type numbers, right? I'm not saying the guy's Travis Kelce, but the guy can play, right? He plays with an edge. He's not going to have to rotate. We'll have to keep an eye on Bryce Hopkins, see what they're doing, this preseason with that potential combination of how they're going to handle the tight ends. But I expect Higbee to be a bigger part of the offense this season. And I think he's far too low right now. He should be priced up there with the Goddards and Fants, Logan Thomases, TJ Hawkinsons. He should be right in that range, and he's being drafted far after those guys. Irv Smith's very similar, right? Irv Smith probably
nobody's pumped Irv Smith more than you, my friend.
Yeah, so he's going to be in that same ballpark. Hawkinson, we already talked up a couple of weeks ago about the winners of free agency, and he's already starting to shoot up boards more with Galladay and Marvin Jones moving on. Mark Andrews is sliding, right? Still a good player, and last year, he was a guy that was being taken a lot as like the third tight end off the board, sometimes fourth, and he still looks like he's going to be the fourth off the board, but there's a few rounds between he and Darren Waller, right? So Andrews is a guy that I like. But as far as late round darts, I think Cole Kmet, really did come on some down the stretch last year and started to take over for Jimmy Graham, started playing more and more and more snaps. And then you also have Adam Troutman. So he's, when I think of Troutman, I think of Rambo. Wasn't that like Rambo's sergeant or whatever, like that comes to get him out of the woods, Drake? I can't remember.
Good Lord.
Anyway. Yeah, he's a Green Beret or what?
That's an obscure reference right there.
I don't know, man. Whatever. But this is a guy that I think for where he's going, for how late he's going, and this is a tight end premium format, and he's going in round 12. It's a dart throw, right? He hasn't shown us what he can do yet, but he was seen as one of the better pass catchers coming out of the class last year. He's a guy that could be a mismatch, and we've seen what this offense can do, right, with athletic tight ends that can be mismatches under Sean Payton. So Adam Troutman is a name you're definitely going to want to remember, especially he's a great kind of, in my mind, like a best ball guy. Like you grab one of your other guys a little bit earlier, and then Troutman's like your second guy, right? He could really give you some upside. And then lastly, a guy we mentioned earlier, Anthony Fercer. He's got some chemistry with Ryan Tannehill, right? He's had some games when Jonnu Smith was hurt, right, that were up there in the tight end one range. So I think he's part of why they felt comfortable letting Jonnu Smith go. And I think Fercer could be a huge sleeper this year at the tight end position. And one last thing on tight end. Yes, every year analysts say that about the tight end position, and typically we've kind of gone the other way with it. And to your point, just said what you just said. I think this is the year where it really could be deep, because you got TJ Hawkinson stepping into a bigger role. You've got Dallas Goedert should be stepping into a bigger role. Let's see what happens with Zach Ertz. You got Noah Fant going into his third year. He did flash last year. You got Logan Thomas, who broke out last year. You got Robert Tonyan, who broke out last year. Yes, touchdown dependent, but that's an offense that's shown historically, right, that they can support a tight end, right, that can go for 600 to 800 yards, and you can get 8 to 9 touchdowns out of them. So you can get that again from Tonyan. And then you got Tyler Higbee now moving into a role that he owns more to himself. Irv Smith moving into a role that he owns more for himself, right? Evan Ingram, always the injury wild card. We'll see what happens with that. Hunter Henry and Jonnu Smith probably going to set each other off, a little bit in their production. But there's just a lot of guys, Drake, they're going to get some more, and who knows what they can do with it, but they're going to get a chance for more opportunity. I can't remember a year where we had tight ends ascending potentially into lead roles in their offense, given the fact they can come into training camp, right, and really earn that and show that they can handle that workload.
And we haven't even mentioned the Gainesville Golden God, Kyle Pitts, who Lord knows where he's going to land, but he's going
in the
off
fifth round right now.
He's going to tight end 6 off the board right now, middle of the 5th round. So,
yeah. And depending on his landing spot, that may be valid, Drake, right? If he lands somewhere where we hear he's immediately going to be used, he's going to be on the field all the time. I mean, talk about a mismatch. Like this is the ultimate version of a mismatch, Essentially, if he gets to play tight end against linebackers and safeties, if he can hold up in the blocking game well enough to get that kind of a role, I mean, wow, it's going to be a problem. It's going to be a real problem for opposing defenses. So, yeah, Pitts, depending on where he landed, he may be worth that pick, but this is a guy that people are they see the talent, they see that it's oozing out of him, and people are very bullish already on Kyle Pitts. So it's going to be tough to get to to get a lot of value out of him, knowing how tough it can be for tight ends to come in and produce early. It's really going to have to be situationally an optimal spot, right, that he lands in with the right coordinator, with the right mindset.
Quarterback's always difficult because the general mindset in the industry is, let's play QB chicken. We're going to wait on the quarterback. In this best ball, you see Patrick Mahomes coming off in the 3rd round. Then in the 4th, we see Josh Allen, Kyler Murray. Dak is holding his own in the 5th round. The name we want to circle back to here is in round 7, and that's Jalen Hurts. And it's not just because I'm an Eagles fan, but it's because you're going to get the dual threat from Jalen Hurts on a team, again, that's probably going to be trailing a lot. And you're getting that in the 7th round. So we don't know what's going on with Deshaun Watson. He's a 9th round pick at this point. But if you want to get that rushing upside, and who doesn't in this day and age, Jalen Hurts in the 7th round might be your last best chance.
Yeah. And what sucks with Hurts, again, this is just where people are better at fantasy football, right? 10, 15 years ago, you could probably get Hurts in the 11th or 12th round. I mean, think about it. Jalen Hurts is going in the 7th round. Last year, we were getting Josh Allen in the 9th and the 10th round. So again, some of this is a little bit of an overreaction of, I've got to have the next Josh Allen. I got to have the next Kyler Murray, whatever you name it, Lamar Jackson. But what Lamar Jackson did 2 years ago, what Josh Allen did last year, even what Kyler Murray did last year to some extent before the injury, those are the things that are really pushing a guy like Jalen Hurts up the board to the point where really, honestly, he's going too high. But you are right? He's kind of the last kind of, if you want to catch a ride on that train that, gives you the dual threat, he's really the last guy unless you're going to, hang your hat on, a rookie, right? Like Trevor Lawrence, who's only going around later, So, and again, now this is best ball. People draft more quarterbacks. They start going earlier, and so we're using ADP from best ball right now from Fantasy Mojo. But I agree with you, man. I think, and Hurts was a guy that I was hoping, would just kind of slide under the radar. He could be the guy this year you get in the 9th, 10th round like Josh Allen last year. But that's not the case, man. People are all over it.
And it shows me that people aren't afraid to pull the trigger a little earlier now on quarterback. We see how deep receiver is. Maybe people say, I'm going to get my couple of stud running backs up top. I can sprinkle these wide receivers in all through the draft, but I want to hang my hat on a quarterback and maybe a stud tight end and not wait until the 14th round and take, Derek Carr and Big Ben and Cam and those kind of guys. So maybe we're seeing a difference in draft strategy. We'll see how.
Hey, man, the other guy, real quick, I know we had a wrap, but
sure.
Matthew Stafford, didn't that kind of surprise you? I like Matt Stafford, and we
7th round
landed. But wow. Talk about a guy that we were touting as, hey, you can get this guy for free. And he really tore it up with Darrell Bevel the year before, right? Before the injuries and stuff hit the team. And now, you're with, McVay, and there's this automatic assumption, right, that really Jared Goff was just, and maybe this is the case, was just completely terrible. And Matthew Stafford is just going to elevate this offense to a complete new level. That's pretty aggressive. On Stafford. You could still get Tom Brady, and you're taking Matt Stafford before Tom Brady. Neither one of these guys are runners. Give me Tom Brady over Matt Stafford.
Tom Brady finishes QB 8 last year in fantasy.
And if that doesn't show you why you need to be able to run, what did he throw for 4,600 yards and 40 touchdowns or something? And he's still QB 8. I mean, that shows you what the legs do, right, for some of these other quarterbacks. And I was hoping we'd get a little bit more of an injury discount on Dak, but the hype train's already rolling. And our good friend Silva at ETR obviously has been a big part of that. He's all over the Cowboys this year and what their offense can do. I was listening to one of his pods the other day, and I was thinking, damn it, Evan, because we're thinking the same way on that. Obviously he had formulated that opinion before I was even there yet, but no discount on Dak. And
if you want a very good article on optimal roster construction, our friends at ETR, Mike Leone, did a really nice piece over there. So shout out to him if you want to check out that work. And if you want to go over to Pro Football Focus, get in on the action, read Dwayne's utilization report, find all those crazy stats that'll make you look smart in the bar, use our promo code HUSTLE. It's going to save you 25%, folks, off any subscription package, and they have several. Trust me, I'm a guy that subscribes to a lot of fantasy sites, okay?
If you talk about a utilization report in the bar, I mean, you could get punched in the face, and please don't blame me. Like, it sounds pretty nerdy.
That's how you get laid up here in New York, my friend. Go up like, hey, you know how many carries this guy had inside the 5? Oh, down you go. But, so I hope you folks enjoyed our little look at what's going on in fantasy football, peek behind the curtain here, and with the smart drafters doing best ball drafts in April because they don't want to go to their kids' little league practice or whatever they're up to. So, or maybe they're doing it at the kids' little league practice. I don't know. But, we just wanted to kind of open things up, and we're going to keep rocking and rolling. And some things are in motion. You might see us doing a few best ball drafts here on the show also, which is always fun. So, again, we'll see you guys later next week.
Great.
Use that promo code HUSTLE to get that. And anything else out of you, Dwayne?
Oh, no. I was about to say the promo code HUSTLE. I was just,
Yes.
Me trying to step in and like help do Brian's role since he's always helping me with mine.
Yep. Promo code HUSTLE, save the 25%. Subscribe to that YouTube channel, and check us out on Twitter. So thanks everybody for hanging out with us. We will see you next week. For Dwayne, I am Brian. Have a good one, folks. Take care.